Scott, I've known for a number of years. I met him because he is a distinguished colleague of my wife, Leslie's, at the university. I don't want to get into any of the things that he may touch on in his bio, but just to say that I've always felt had very high regards for Scott and the work that he does. I just think he's really a good profile of what a good Rotarian really is all about. So I'm thrilled that he's interested in joining us. And the only thing I'll add, because I don't know if he'll include this, I don't assume he would, there is another connection that he has, and that Scott's wife, Judy, works for David Askin's law firm and has assisted us and some of the services that they have provided our foundation, the club's foundation. So that's kind of a nice link as well. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Scott to give us a little bit more detail about his background.
Scott, I'm going to interrupt here and ask if it's all right with you if we record this.
Of course, that's fine. So my internet connection's been a bit edgy here, so hopefully we'll stay connected. You can hear me fine, I take it? Okay, good. Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you all for the opportunity. You said 45 minutes for my biography, right?
45, 50.
Well, a long time ago, I was raised in Seattle, and these were in the days where I could look across Lake Washington and see forest land, and now it's just a Microsoft suburbia. But true to being a person who was raised in Seattle, I did live on a houseboat in my last 10 years in Seattle. And what a magical setting that was. I would roll out of bed, go kayaking in the shadow of Seattle, downtown Seattle. There would be literally Native American fishermen casting their nets for salmon. It was truly a wonderful experience, but not a very good place to raise a family with the water cold, deep, and dangerous. And so my wife, Judy, as Dan mentioned, she insisted we go to land, and on the way out, I decided I was ready for another career. And I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I realized what I really enjoyed most was the teaching I was doing on the side at the University of Washington. And so I made a segue there to get a PhD at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. But I left out my Seattle portfolio. Before that, I was 15 years working for newspapers. Now, it's very, very much my identity was as a journalist. I worked for the Seattle Times, the Associated Press, but mostly for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, which after 113 years, I think it is, it folded. It was the morning newspaper, I thought the feisty newspaper. But I had bailed out before it collapsed like so many newspapers have today. So I went to North Carolina, but on my way there, people asked, well, what will you do when you get your PhD? And I said, well, I hear good things about the University of Oregon. I feel like I'm predestined to be here. Because sure enough, 3 years later, I got my PhD, and there was an opening in Eugene at the University of Oregon. It was a good fit. I got the job, and it's been good. Well, it was good for me. It was hard for Judy, who had a toddler on hand, another baby in the oven, and she enabled me to make that transition, but I'm still paying off that debt. So I came here to the University of Oregon. Those of you are familiar with the universities, which I think is many of you, it's publish or perish. And so research was also a big part of my work field. Initially, I was interested in doing work on numeracy. That is how journalists do math, which is poorly. They can't get it right. And that got broadened out to news accuracy. Do we get the story right? What effect does that have on credibility? And in the last 10 or so years, I've changed focus to look at how the news media worldwide, but especially in the United States, reports on human rights abuses. What can we do to show what's going on in the world? If we as the US press or the international press doesn't pay attention, who will? And some of my work I did was with Paul Slovic, who I suspect many of you know is a psychology professor who's really changed people's views on how we tell a story. If we focus on millions or tens of thousands of, right now it's apropos with COVID, the tens thousands of people who are getting sick and some who are dying, it's just too hard for us to fathom. But if we had a neighbor, a friend who has COVID, then we know how to relate. Well, what relationship does that have for us as journalists, for us as storytellers, or for us as Rotarians for that matter? How do we help a community and keep that interest alive? I also then taught the advanced reporting classes at the University of Oregon and found that not only did I move, but my whole profession was in transition, and I've had to relearn what it means to be a journalist, and no longer it's the newspaper king. In fact, it's the last along the food chain. I think Jordan will be feeding him newspapers for because the ones that weren't collected. And so we had to learn and teach our students how we can, well, the students taught us how we can use social media, do multimedia, and how the many really different ways we have to tell a story. And so I think at the same time that we've laid off and lost literally tens of thousands of jobs in journalism, in newspaper journalism, there are more opportunities than ever for our students to pursue and for us professors to teach. One of the joys of being an academician is that you have sabbaticals. And I took my first one up in the northern Italy, where I was joined by a UO professor, Dale Morse. And when we came down to the lowlands, we went to Venice to catch a ferry, and we couldn't find the ferry. And I, being a guy, of course, wasn't going to ask for directions, but Judy did, and grabbed the first person she could find, and up came Dan Reese, and said, "Oh, hi, Judy. Hi, Scott." And he led us to the ferry spot. So. As I said, I feel like we're predestined with all these connections and interconnections. I was also taking a thought about how the Rotary has its kind of hokey introduction. Was the four-way test? Is it the truth? Is it fair? Do we build goodwill? Is it beneficial for all? But when I think about it, these are really standards that, that I've try to teach my own students in journalism, and we can translate it into practice, into philanthropy, into helping others as part of the mission of Rotary. So I still haven't quite figured out what you guys are all about, but I like the camaraderie I see, of the way that you're able to relate to each other. I love the service elements. I love the attention to the world beyond Eugene's borders, beyond the United States borders, the international outlook you have. And you say you have fun. So I figure I'm looking for social contact that goes beyond the 9 feet distance that we have to work with today, and when we can all be in the same room, and to be part of that, of your network, that mission. It seems like a good fit. If it wasn't predestined, it's still a good place for me. So I have still another 40 minutes for questions, and thank you for your time.
That's great, Scott. Thank you very much. You know, I must say that that encounter, that chance encounter that we had in Venice years ago, was one of my favorite small world experiences of my life. It was such a kick. So we do have time for just a couple of questions before we move on to a couple of announcements. But does anybody want to interrogate Scott with a couple of questions? I will add one thing, and I'm very pleased about this. Andrew, you've agreed to be Scott's mentor as he joins us. And I really appreciate that. I can't think of a better mentor. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Andrew.
That actually leads me to a question. Scott, you have any hobbies outside of work?
You know, precious few. I like to dabble in the garden. I like to read. I like to play, but I find again that much of my life for the last 20 years have been devoted to family and to work, and that's been just fine. Now I'm restless. I want to do some new things.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I should
One
add,
more
for those
question.
who don't know Scott's wife, Judy, she's a very talented musician. And she is a social activist in her own right and very, very active in the local Unitarian Universalist community.
So Scott, you mentioned children. It sounds like they're probably grown up by now. And can you talk just a touch about them? Sure.
I have two daughters. One is just completing her final year of school in Lawrence University in Wisconsin, which means she's living with us in Eugene, in this crazy world of ours. And my oldest daughter has been laid off now 3 times in the last 3 months. As she gets a job and it disappears. The latest one was in a buyout in New York. The whole company went. Such is the modern life.
Great. Well, we all look forward to getting to know you better, Scott. I must say we're particularly appreciative of folks that not only choose to join during this pandemic year of meeting exclusively online, and actually you've never had the experience of joining us in person. So we really do appreciate that and look forward to a time when we can all once again be together in person.
We're more fun then.
Pardon me?
We're more fun then.
Yep. That's right. That's right. even more fun if you can even imagine that. So just a couple of announcements, folks, before we move to Happy Dollars.